In this video, I want to continue talking about Chapter 2 of Gary Allen's None Dare Call It Conspiracy. On page 27, I want to continue reading Allen's great quote. Allen notes that there are people throughout history like mobsters, Al Capone, individuals like Adolf Hitler, I guess from low-class backgrounds. And he writes that now suppose someone with the same immoral, grasping personality was born into a Petrarchan family of great wealth and was educated at the best prep schools than Harvard, Yale, or Princeton, followed by graduate work possibly at Oxford. In these institutions, he would become totally familiar with history, economics, psychology, sociology, and political science. After having graduated from such institutional establishments of higher learning, are we likely to find him out in the streets peddling 50-cent tickets to a numbers game? Right? Would you find him pushing marijuana to high schoolers or running a string of houses of prostitution? Would he be getting involved in gangland killings? Not at all. With all that sort of education, this person would realize that if one wants power, real power, the lesson of history says, get into the government business. Right? Become a politician or work for political power, or better yet, get some politician to front for you. That is where the real power and the real money is. Right? So, and you do this, of course, again, if you don't want to become a politician yourself, right? You become head of a corporation, you ally yourself with an internationalist banker, you sell yourself, you market yourself. There are politicians that go to these big businesses and make it very clear that they're not going to engage in regulations. They're going to turn a blind eye to business exploitation, and therefore they get a lot of money from businesses. Right? Since Citizens United in 2000 and I think it was 2010, Citizens United, the court case was decided by the U.S. Supreme Court that now allows corporations, as individuals, to spend unlimited amounts of money on behalf of political candidates, as long as they don't coordinate the funding with the candidate's campaign. But they can still spend millions and millions of dollars to defeat somebody who's willing to stand up to corporate exploitation. They're able to use the money that the hard-working proletarians at the bottom of the corporation earn, right? The labor power of the proletarians, to use that money to fund corrupt politicians who will support their exploitation is very simple. Who will support their plans and their practices. It doesn't even require much thought to know that. But most people don't see it that way. And of course the corporate control media, of course, doesn't spin it that way, doesn't explain it that way. They explain it as freedom of speech for the corporation who exists as an individual. Of course a corporation isn't an individual, it never was an individual. It's run by corporate leadership who has their own agenda, which is often very different than the agenda or the needs of the low-class workers in the corporation. But anyway, on page 28, Allen notes what seems very, very true about politicians today. Every conspirator must be an accomplished liar and a far-seeking planner. And politicians, they lie today so much. They have they don't have a conscience, put it that way. They don't buy into the idea of honesty or integrity, and they don't accept a reality. I wouldn't say it's the reality, it's a reality, that honor is important. They don't accept that. They probably don't trust one another either, except that they know that they need to all work together, right, against the real common enemy, which is the lower class people, right? So if they take over all of American society, I'm sure they'll start fighting amongst one another too, but right now they have to kind of make sure that they're against the people, and they join enough together, not to have too many problems amongst themselves. Now on page 29 here, I do have a problem a little bit with Allen's oversimplification of Marx's argument, because Allen seems to focus solely on the Communist Manifesto, and of course he's reading the Communist Manifesto. It was a very simple work of literature. He reads it in a very simplistic light, and a very suspicious light, I'd say as well. But if you would read some of Marx's earlier philosophical writings, they do show, these early philosophical writings do show that Marx was very concerned about worker alienation, very concerned about wage slavery, and how people are historical beings. So I think that certainly Marx's ideas have been used. I agree with Allen on this point that Marx's ideas have certainly been used to create horrors. But like a George Orwell, I think Marx may have been the individual who was duped by others, rather than a willing conspirator. I mean, although I suppose this point of view, I mean, is not particularly relevant. I mean, whether Marx was a part of the conspiracy or not, I don't know. It's not even relevant to think so. But what is relevant is that some of Marx's ideas, they're valuable, they're perceptive. Even if Marx's conclusions about establishing a society in which no one had to possess a job, right? You know, you could fish in the morning, right, and those kind of things, or fish in the afternoon, which is fish aren't actually biting in the afternoon. Marx doesn't understand much about fishing, I don't think. But, you know, critique after dinner, you know, whatever else it happens to be, hunt in the morning, you know, those are, I don't buy that argument. I think that to a certain extent we do need jobs, we do need a society in which people have work. And I think Marx puts far too much faith in the ability of ordinary people to move beyond the syndicate stage of business ownership. But I do think that the syndicate stage of business ownership, in which employees collectively own their companies, rather than wealthy shareholders own the companies, I think that's a good system to have. And I do believe in a system in which the corporate management doesn't make lots more money than their average worker does. Because I don't buy this conception that corporations need this corporate management to survive. I don't think the corporate management does a whole lot for the corporation that the corporation couldn't do by itself, by a syndicate of workers who are being paid the same amount of money. So, I mean, I'm a fan in some ways of greater wage equality. But I'm well aware, as Alan is, that that's not what has occurred in American society. That's not what the socialism that's being proposed in our society today is all about. It's about exploitation. It's about creating 99% of the population that's all living in poverty together, while 1% of the population lives opulent, wealthy, elite lives. And Alan writes it this way on page 30. Alan says that socialism would be the bait, the excuse to establish the dictatorship, right? I mean, this did occur in the USSR, right, by Bolsheviks like Lenin. And I think that there's one video, I think it's called Chomsky on Lenin, Stalin, and the Soviet Union, where Chomsky notes those same kind of things, those same kind of concepts. And then Chomsky, professor at MIT University. Of course, Chomsky's not quite so conspiratorial as Alan, but I think that, you know, certainly Chomsky is a very well-researched person, and I do appreciate Noam Chomsky's writings. Again, Alan makes errors, and I want to make this clear. I disagree with certain things that Alan says. Alan makes errors about how Marx conceives socialism, right? I mean, Marx conceived socialism as very individualistic. People would hunt in the morning and get fish in the afternoon, act as a critic in the evening. It would be a world in which industrialism has made individuals so efficient that they would not need to work in the factories and jobs that were self-alienating. Alan does not focus on that Marxist argument. Alan also argues that the best type of government in the United States is a constitutional republic with limited government. But this, to me, is not an ideal. In the society in which the corporate capitalists, with only a limited government, would be able to market thousands of unsafe products. We do need something to come against corporate capitalism. And maybe the people in such a system would rise up together and have more Jeffersonian democracy. But I don't know. I doubt that. In a lot of ways, we do have a problem with an IQ problem in this country. That a lot of people are not informed about corrupt business practices, and they buy into this argument that business loves them, that corporations would never abuse them, would never purposely market unsafe products to people, even though there's so much historical evidence to the contrary. But they want to buy into that belief. The only way I see it is the following. The solution to our problem as a country, there are two options. And both of these options may be impossible to achieve. The first option is that we need a government of virtuous people who oppose corruption in big business. How we could achieve that, I don't know, right? Or we could also have people who come together in their communities to oppose the corruption of big business, right? This Jeffersonian democracy. I think of the two, that almost you would have to say that number two is more probable. The Jeffersonian democracy is more probable than having virtuous people in government, because of the way government's set up in America, and the way that most governments are always set up, and how wealthy elites always try to infiltrate any government you have. But again, number two, have a Jeffersonian democracy conception, we must have educated and involved citizens. We need a population of educated and involved people who are not stupid. But that doesn't exist in America today. Most people are relatively uneducated. They don't know much about many issues. And for either choice, though, I'm going to make it clear, American libertarians are incorrect, right? The corporate capitalism must be opposed by some entity, either the people or government or something, because many of those who run these huge corporations are people who desire, or people who lust for power and wealth, and their lust for power and wealth knows few bounds. And these people are going to market unsafe products to people if they're not opposed, and I think that the Ford Pinto is a good example of that, but there are many examples of that. Well, in my next video, I want to continue talking about Chapter 2 of None Dare Call It Conspiracy, and finish up the chapter. Thank you for watching, and I hope this video was informative for you.